The sound of a little buck going to Dwight Yoakam. You know, it's time for us to check in with our former governor, former senator, and a very good friend of this radio show, Governor George Allen, joining us here on News Radio WRVA. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Start your engines.
Are you excited for that the Indy race through DC?
Not really. I like NASCAR better. My son Forrest and I are going to be going to the Bristol night race in September. That's my favorite track. I like Martinsville a lot too, and Richmond where you were. But let me just say one thing: the 1980s is your question of the day. I don't want to. Well, I'll tell you what I'd like to bring back from the 1980s, other than King Richard Petty racing in NASCAR. What I'd really love to see is Ronald Reagan back.
Overwhelmingly. That's the number one response we've gotten this morning.
Good. You have great listeners.
Yes, 100%. They want Ronald Reagan back. You know, like the All the Family song. If we could just get Ronald Reagan back once again, the world would be a lot better. His legacy is incredible. Oh, by the way, I did go see the movie On the Brink. It was good. It was a little slow about the Reykjavik. I thought J.K. Simmons, who played George Soltz, was tremendous. It was very interesting, but it also encapsulated everything we saw inside the Reagan movie starring Dennis Quaid.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. Well, thanks for the review.
That was my review of it, and more Ronald Reagan movies, the better. All right. I want to challenge something we always talk about here, sir. People vote with their feet. So what does that tell us about California? That Harry and Meghan said, California, I'm leaving. I'm going back to England. Listen, California is falling apart. There's that video that we see. Some kid was dropped off at Cal, one of the most elite colleges in the country. Mom's driving out, and there's nothing but homeless outside the campus. She's like, why are we sending our kid here with this homeless encampment in Berkeley? You see them, they just passed, they're passing the Nick Shirley Act, sending it on to Governor Newsom. So people vote with their feet. Meghan and Harry have had enough of California, and they're leaving.
Yeah, well, you've heard me say this hundreds of times on your show, Rich, is that people are not trees. Unlike trees, people and businesses and their money can and do leave. And they can and do leave. Obviously, Virginia's unfortunately been stagnant for the last 14 years. But the Carolinas and Tennessee and Georgia and Florida and Texas and out west, Nevada and Arizona and Idaho, people are moving there and moving out of California. And on the east, they're getting the heck out of New York and New Jersey and Illinois and those high tax, high cost states. Well, here's what's happening in California. They have it on the ballot, a one-time 5% wealth tax on California residents with a net worth of over $1 billion. And there's already a lot of well-known billionaires who are shifting their official residency out of California ahead of this and it's also retroactive. So if they pass it, it's retroactive to January 1st of this year. And so, some of the founders of Google, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Peter Thiel, the Uber CEO, Travis Kalanick has left, a lot of others. Even the Hollywood movie director, Steven Spielberg, is getting the heck out of there. And I suspect, and I cannot stand monarchies. I like a meritocracy. But this applies to individuals with a net worth of over $1 billion if they have a trust. I mean, they can own stock that is worth $1 billion or more, or trusts. And I suspect that Prince Harry, has a trust over $1 billion, and that's businesses, stocks, art, collectibles, intellectual property, and all the rest. And so it shows how pathetic California is they're even running out woke monarchs back to England.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you look at Mamdani and his, I'm not even sure how to pronounce it. He's taxing people that have more than one household. I mean, what did Margaret Thatcher who said, socialism is great until you run out of other people's money.
Yeah. In fact, in Florida, they've made Mondani their number one economic development person of the year because there's so many people leaving, and they have been for years. And then it was accelerated through the pandemic. The lockdown states that muzzled people and shut down businesses, forced them to get vaccines and all the rest. That just accelerated the exodus away from those states. And Virginia was bad as well. Meanwhile, Tennessee was open, and Georgia and Florida, and well-run, well-governed states.
I'll just say it, sir. Red states were open. Blue states weren't. Pretty simple.
I just say freedom-loving and freedom-respecting states, and those states have lower taxes, lower cost of living, lower cost of doing business, right-to-work laws, and the states that lock down are those with relatively, comparatively higher taxes. And what bothered me the most in Virginia was this timid acquiescence to every dictate that was saying this is an emergency and you have to close the schools and muzzle the kids. And, the government colleges, the state colleges were forcing students to get vaccinated. And a lot of this, everyone's recounting this. And the reason to recount all of this is to make sure if this ever happens again, another pandemic, you have some proportionality and actually do follow the science. And the science was that young people were not at risk. It was older people who had so-called comorbidities. And those are the ones you need to focus on. And it's a question of whether those young people who lost a couple of years of education will ever catch back up. And so, at any rate, California is an example of what not to do in so many different ways. And but their billionaires tax that they're talking about is already causing people to leave, which will be great for the states they're going to, whether it's Texas or Nevada or Arizona or Florida or Tennessee or the Carolinas. And so,
right.
The Virginians need to learn this. Virginians get we have these surpluses year after year, and they give a little bit of a rebate, which is better than nothing. But look at North Carolina, what they would do. North Carolina, with these surpluses, would ratchet down incrementally their income tax rate.
I just talked about that this morning. $1 million were ahead. Give me my money back.
See, oh, really? All right, perfect. Way to go, Rich. If Virginia had the laws and constraints and fiscal discipline, admirable fiscal discipline of North Carolina, we would be ratcheting down our income tax rate. Our income tax rate in Virginia is 5.75%. That's the highest marginal rate. North Carolina is 3.5% going to 3%. So that's half. Our corporate tax rate is 6%. North Carolina is 3%, and they'll be at 0 in the year 2030. And so what they do is when they have a surplus after they've funded education, the schools, law enforcement, core government services, if there's a surplus, they ratchet down the tax, whether it's 0.25% or 0.5%. So you have that enduring benefit and having your state much more attractive and competitive with other states. And you look at Virginia versus North Carolina. North Carolina is booming in population. They have one thing Virginia has that they don't have is we have a much better port. But Virginia's been stagnant for the last 14 years. It may go up a little a year, it may go down in migration, and people, are leaving, say, the Northeast, and they're just bypassing Virginia. They're going to North Carolina and South Carolina, and Georgia, and Tennessee, and Florida, and it matters. I mean,
when I left California, sir, I moved to Arizona. I got a 7% raise simply because I'm not paying California taxes. The difference between the two. When I left California the first time and I went to Florida, I got a 10% raise because I didn't have to pay state income taxes.
Yeah,
you can ask your brother this, who's a general manager in the NFL. Where do all these players go? They want to live in Florida. They want to live in Arizona. They want to live in Nevada. Because that 10% that you have on some of these high marginal tax rates, ours 5%, that actually means real money to real people.
Yeah. When Bruce was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and trying to get free agents, that was a selling point. When Tom Brady, who I don't particularly like, but when he was deciding whether to go to the Chargers or to Tampa, by going to Tampa, he saved 13.3% on income taxes. That's real money. And I remember the golfers, Mickelson was saying how much smarter Tiger Woods was by being a resident
1 minute
of Florida rather than California.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if you're making, $80,000 or $8 million.
It's real money.
3% is real money. And then on top of it, everything else costs, California has the highest sales taxes on top of it all. Their gasoline prices are always at least $1.50 more than when you cross over the Colorado River into Arizona. And it's just everything is just much more costly. And then their electricity rates are the worst.
If they don't have rolling brownouts.
Yeah.
Which
and now they're
knocking
out. Now they're knocking out their refineries, and so they're going to have to be. And as you know, from Bakersfield, Kern County, there's plenty of oil.
But
they don't want to have the refineries there. So Valero and others have left there, so that exacerbates their costs. And these are just economic lessons. This is the beauty of our country. The laboratories of democracy and innovation are the states. And see what states do things that, hey, that's a good idea. We ought to emulate that here in Virginia. Or if it's a bad idea, say, gosh, we don't want to do that. Look at that disaster.
And then people aren't trees.
Yeah, they move. And if you want to have a vibrant, growing, prospering Commonwealth of Virginia, what they're doing in Virginia in this last session of the General Assembly is they've raised taxes, which is hardly making Virginia more affordable.
Nope.
They're raising our electricity rates.
Reggie, thank you very much.
Yep. And then they've tripled their salaries for a part-time legislator to $50,000. I would ask your listeners who are part-time workers, how many of y'all make $50,000 in a part-time job?
By the way, sir,
there's too many.
We're out of time, but I'm going to throw this out anyway. And Super Dave's yelling at me like, hurry up. I don't know if you saw this. They gave $5 million aside for the gerrymandering election.
Yeah.
Turns out it wasn't enough money. So all the municipalities are coming up short. Richmond, the city of Richmond, $375,000 of unreimbursed money they're going to be stuck for because of the gerrymandering debacle.
Yeah, and it's in these congressional races, these Democrats ought to be asked. They were for that gerrymandering and disenfranchising people in the Richmond suburbs and rural areas, and giving that power to densely populated urban Northern Virginia, and beyond all the cost, they wanted to disenfranchise people, and this cannot happen again. We're talking about learning from the past and learning from others. We have fair maps. We're going to have tough elections, and here in the 2nd Congressional District with Jen Kiggins, who I was with earlier this week with emceeing an event with Speaker Johnson. Rob Whitman is a hardworking, very senior and very influential member of Congress, and he's got a tough race in the 1st Congressional Districts. Both the 1st and the 2nd are going to be targeted by these same national Democrats who spent over $70 million trying to sucker and inveigle Virginians to give up their franchise with those rigged election maps that they tried to get through, which fortunately the Supreme Court of Virginia found unconstitutional.
And the Tazewell judge was right all along, and nobody wanted to give him credit. Sir, thank you very much. My best to your beautiful wife, and I will catch up with you next week. Yeah,
Susan's brother's funeral, and Susan's going to be speaking tomorrow in Crozet. So think of Susan, and I know a lot of people are sending her condolences.
Yeah.
And we'll miss Steve, but he'll remain in our hearts and memories.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of her mom, and of course your wonderful bride, and of course you all know that you're on our thoughts and prayers.
Thank you a lot. Appreciate it.
God bless you.
Adios.
Thank you, sir. Governor George Allen joining us here on News Radio WRVA. All right, coming up, we'll have Dave Saunders join us, find out what's going on in Richmond this weekend. But real quick, let me remind you, Pearson Signature Dealerships are here for you. Pearson Signature Dealerships are there for you before, during, and after the